Okay, good evening. Good evening. David Cashman here with SEB Housing. This is the information session for the affordable unit at Forest Glen Estates in Uxbridge. Looks like folks are coming in. So 6:03, let me just give it one more minute, see if any other folks want to join, and then we'll get started. For those of you that are here already, can anyone just give me a quick confirmation that you can hear me okay? Just want to make sure I'm not talking to myself. Can anyone hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Great,
I
thank
can
you.
hear you.
Thank you. And let me just put my blind down. There we go. That's better. So let me share my screen. Got a little slideshow prepared for you here. Pretty simple. I will go through it, and yeah, this info session is for your benefit. So at any time, if you have a question, feel free to stop me and ask your question. If it's something that I'm going to cover later in the presentation, I might ask you to just hold on a minute, as it's something I'm going to get to. Otherwise, happy to take whatever questions. You can also put it in the chat, but I'll just be candid. Sometimes I don't see it. I'm trying to look at the presentation, and sometimes the chat doesn't pop up where I see it. So if you do that and I don't seem to be responding, please don't hesitate. Just unmute yourself and say, hey, Dave, I got a question for you, and I'm happy to answer that. I expect this information session will go for anywhere between 40 minutes and on sort of the low end, maybe up to an hour, depending on if there are any questions. So with that, I'll get started. We are currently in the application and marketing period for the affordable single family, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit within Forest Glen Estates. We've been working with this developer for several years now. I think we ran the original lottery 4 years ago. There were in total 5 affordable units built within this development. 4 of them have already sold. And now this final remaining affordable unit has been built. It was completed within the last 6 months, I believe. And now we're doing this final lottery for this last affordable unit. Again, it's 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. And the sales price is $193,700 with a monthly condo fee of $185. Let me just give you a quick note about sales prices in case anyone is wondering how those get calculated. So in this program, there's basically an affordable housing sales price calculator that we have to use. So how that works is we take the income limit for a hypothetical 3-person household for this area. We multiply it by 0.3 to get 30%. And divide by 12 to get the monthly amount. The idea here is that a 3-person household spending 30% of their gross income toward the carrying costs of owning the unit can afford a certain amount. The sales price, when factoring in condo fees, taxes, principal and interest payments, etc., seeks to match that amount. So as certain inputs go up, like if condo fees go up, the sales prices need to come down because your monthly payment would go up. And so the sales price needs to come down to account for that. If taxes were to go down, then the sales price could be higher. In any case, using that formula, that calculator that we're actually required to use, we get a sales price of $193,700. And in fact, this sales price was set years ago. It was set for the original lottery. If you were to do this exercise today using the current income limits, you would get a higher affordable sales price. I'm not exactly sure what it would be, but it would be above $200,000. It might even be closer to like $210,000 or $215,000. So as an applicant now, you're getting the benefit of the sales price that was set like 5 years ago when income limits for the affordable program were lower. So that's a good thing for you. As you've probably seen from the materials, but this is obviously a biggie, this is an age-restricted community. So one household member has to be age 55 or above. Doesn't have to be every household member. So it could be a parent who's 60 and their child. That's fine. You just have to have one household member who's age 55 plus. As I said at the beginning, we're in the midst of the application period, and there is a deadline to submit your application, which is July 14th at 2 p.m. This is probably one of the biggest takeaways from this whole info session, which is if you think you're interested in this opportunity, get your application in advance of that deadline. And in fact, I would even encourage you to get it get it into us as far in advance of that deadline as you can, just in case anything is missing. So in that way, if something's missing and we come back to you and say, hey, so-and-so, thanks for your application, but it looks like you forgot to submit your mortgage pre-approval, which is my next point. You can say, oh, well, it's only, June 24th. I have some time now to go figure that out. Versus if you submit it on July 13th, you're kind of running out of time to fix anything that's missing. So get it in early. I think you'll find that the application itself is hopefully pretty straightforward and hopefully doesn't take lots of time for you to complete. I think the biggest, the thing that will take you the most time to get is the mortgage pre-approval. So that's probably the thing. If you haven't done it yet, I would go start meeting with lenders and try and get that squared away. A point on that, which you may have seen from the information packet on our website or elsewhere, is that you can go to any lender that you like. That's totally up to you. There's no requirements about using a particular lender in this program. However, these are affordable units, and there are restrictions in this program and on this unit that are specific to the affordable program and which don't exist for market rate units. For example, you have to use the unit as your principal residence, and there's a whole formula for how you set sales prices if you go to sell it in the future. That's not a problem for some lenders, but it could be a problem for other lenders in the products that they have. What that means is that my recommendation is if you can go to a lender who has experience with affordable housing, I think that's to your benefit because hopefully, likely, they'll be familiar with this type of restriction or perhaps this exact restriction. Maybe they've done plenty of 40B affordable loans before, and they'll say, oh, yeah, the deed rider, I get it. I know exactly what the restrictions are. No problem. We have a product that works for this. It's not to say that a lender who's never worked with affordable housing couldn't have such a product, but they might not, or they might just not be aware of the requirements and restrictions. And you just don't want to have a lender who gives you a mortgage pre-approval. And then after we run the lottery and you're moving forward in this process and you go back to them and say, okay, I've signed my purchase and sale agreement. Now I need to get a mortgage commitment. And they start looking through some more of the paperwork a little bit more closely. And they say, oh, shoot, I didn't realize there was this deed rider and that's a problem. And I actually don't know if I have a product for you. And now all of a sudden you're scrambling and you might need to pivot and find another lender. So anyway, bottom line, I think it's to your best interest to use a lender who's got familiarity with the affordable housing program, but totally your choice. I'm just trying to bring up a page here. This is the page in the information packet where we talk about the mortgage pre-approval standards. And here is a link. This is a very helpful link where you can find lenders with a lot of experience in affordable housing in Massachusetts. So if you're not really sure and you still haven't gotten your pre-approval, this is a great place to start. You can go on there. I think you can search by geographic region and they'll spit out a whole bunch of lenders in your area who you can get in touch with. Whether you're using a lender from this site or not, this is a great page to just have with you. You could even tear it out of the info pack and bring it with you when you're meeting with them to say, hey, you're getting me a mortgage pre-approval. Eventually, I'd like to use you to get the commitment. This is kind of laying out the standards, lender, Mr. or Mrs. Lender, here's what I'm going to need. And that way they go in eyes wide open on, the type of product that's going to be required. So this is a great page. This is page 8 of the info packet. You just bring it with you and show it to them so there's no surprises later on. Okay. Let me just give you a quick bit about who I am, who we are. So I work for SEB Housing, LLC. We are an affordable housing consulting group in Needham, Massachusetts. We've been working with this developer for 5 or 6 years now. And we work with developers all over the state of Massachusetts. We work on both homeownership and rental opportunities. We're not the developer. We're not the sales team. We're not the management team. We're strictly an off-site affordable housing compliance group who helps the management teams or the developers or the sales teams work through these processes, because there are a lot of rules and regulations around the affordable units, and they often need a group like ours who knows these rules to help them make sure that they comply. So in this case, we got hired by the developer, and we're the ones who put together this information packet, which I just showed you. The application that you've probably potentially seen as well. That's something we put together. That looks like this. We do the marketing. We got the units on our website. We do the administration of the lottery. We start the marketing process, placing ads in newspapers, on various websites, reaching out to community contact groups, and we're the main contact in this lottery period. You're not dealing with the developer, you're dealing with us. So if you have questions, reach out to us, be happy to talk about it. We're the main point of contact, sort of right now and up to the lottery. If you haven't been there already, we have a nice website. You can find all the various, not all of them, but the active lotteries and properties that we're working with. It's not all of them, but it's a bunch. Certainly this one is on here on the lottery page. You can find important information about this opportunity, income limits, deadlines, asset limits, etc. If you need to get in touch with us, here's the best way to do so. I will say email is best. Okay, if you don't mind, email is really best. We try and get back to people the same day or by the next day at the latest. You can absolutely call. There's nothing wrong with calling, but I will say you often will have to leave a message. It's unlikely someone will actually pick up the phone, just given the volume of calls that we get. Please don't get frustrated and hang up, because then we won't know you called. Leave a message. You will get a call back. You will get a call back. Just, hey, my name is so-and-so, calling about this opportunity, have a question. We will get back to you. So either of those is fine. Let me give you a little bit more about the property again. And some of you may know this better than I do. I don't live in Uxbridge. I'm in Needham. Most of this is what's given to us by the developer. And anyone moving forward would have an opportunity after the lottery to actually see the unit, meet with the sales team, look around. But just sort of briefly, again, it's a 2-bedroom home. It's a little over 1,500 square feet. It's got 2 bathrooms. It includes forced hot and cold air heating and cooling, a full unfinished basement, and a 2-car garage. If you are someone who has sufficient assets, you wanted to finish the basement, that's something you could speak to the developer about. I don't know if they would do it or not, but it would have to be an upgrade purchased outside of the purchase of the home. It's got to be totally separate, and as such, it's probably not something you can get financing from a bank for. You probably have to do it from your own assets. So again, it's a totally separate agreement from the purchase and sale of the home. And the reason for that is because if and when you go to resell the home in the future, it needs to be based on a formula which is based on this original sales price. If you spend, $50,000 finishing the basement and up this price, then you artificially increase the resale price in the future, making it unaffordable to a future buyer. Anyway, so whether it's finishing an unfinished basement or other add-ons, again, first of all, you'd have to check with the developer that they would even do it. But assuming that they would, it would be separate from the purchase and the price of the unit itself. These units are a short distance from the town center. There's local shopping, restaurants, a number of state parks in the area, and Route 146 is close by, so you can kind of get to various places that way. Let's talk about the eligibility requirements for this opportunity. So first of all, everyone in the household has to be a first-time home buyer. A first-time home buyer means you cannot have owned a home in the past 3 years. Cannot have owned a home in the past 3 years. But conveniently, there are a few exceptions to that rule, one of which is if you're over 55. So, and because it's an over 55 community, you probably are necessarily going to meet that exception, right? So, if you owned a home 2 years ago and you're 60 years old, but you've sold it, well, you meet the exception to the first-time home buyer rule. Now, you do have to have sold it. Okay, let's be clear on that. So even if you meet the exception to the rule, you can't own the home at the time you submit your lottery application to SEB. If you do, we're going to send you a notice that says, hey, I'm sorry, you're not eligible for this opportunity. You own a home. But if you've sold that home and you meet one of the exceptions, you'll be okay. And again, since it's over 50, a 55 plus community, and that is one of the exceptions, you probably wouldn't necessarily get the exception. There's other exceptions too for single parents or displaced homemakers, and you can read about that in the information packet if that applies to you. You owned a home with a spouse, you no longer own the home with the spouse, you're separated from the spouse, and either you are a parent, child, or you've been working primarily in the home for a number of years just to take care of the home. Those are sort of the three main exceptions to the first-time home buyer rule, which again states that you can't have owned a home in the past 3 years unless you meet one of those three exceptions. There are income limit requirements or limitations, and I guess that probably doesn't come as a surprise to anyone. It's an affordable housing opportunity. The price of the unit is set in such a way that it's significantly below comparable market rate units within the development, which I think some have sold, I think, in excess of $500,000. So you're getting a nice break on the typical sales price of the unit. And as such, so no surprise there are income limitations. Let's talk quickly about what those are. It's by household size. So one person can make up to $69,850. Two people can make up to $79,800. Three people can make up to $89,800, and four people can make up to $99,750. Again, it's based on the number of people in the household who's applying. So it could be the case that the house is more affordable to a four-person household making, let's say, $98,000. They make almost up to this income limit here. It could be more affordable to this household than it is to this household, saying they make, let's say they make $68,000 a year. So they're right up at this income limit, but still, $30,000 less than this family. So the price of the unit doesn't fluctuate or change based on your particular household income or asset profile. The price is the price, and it doesn't change, depending on the household who's applying. It's just the price stays the same. There's an asset limit too, which is $275,000. That's pretty good. The typical amount is $75,000 in affordable housing opportunities that we work on, but because this is age restricted, they get this benefit of another $200,000. So the limit is $275,000, which is great. It's more than the actual price of the home. In theory, there could be a household who could just buy it cash. I don't know that anyone would do that, but theoretically, someone could have enough in assets to just buy it outright. We talked a little bit before, you got to be pre-approved for a mortgage. So if you haven't done that yet, get that started. That's probably the most time-consuming part of the application process. You can't have a financial interest in the development or be a related party. I don't think I've heard really of cases of applicants for affordable homes having a financial interest in the development. I mean, I suppose it's possible if you're an investor, but if you are, you would not be eligible. It does occasionally come up that people are considered related parties. So if you know the builder or related to, not know them, but if you're related to them, that would disqualify you, and that's because of the appearance of, unfairness or preferential treatment. So, the developer's brother per se, I don't know if he has one, but if he did, would not be eligible just because other people might assume, oh, he got special treatment. He's the developer's brother. The rules were bent for him, et cetera, et cetera. And as I talked about before, at least one household member has got to be 55 years of age or older. Let's talk quickly about the income and asset restrictions and just a little bit more about what that looks like. So income is your gross income before taxes or deductions or whatever. It's the gross amount that you earn. It includes, if you're a W-2 employee, you've got an employer, it's your salary or whatever you make in the course of a year if you're an hourly employee. If you are self-employed, it's a little bit different because you get to deduct the costs of running your business. So you'd have to submit profit and loss statements and show us, okay, here's what my gross income is from running my business. Here are all my expenses of getting supplies, travel, renting an office space, et cetera, et cetera. Once you get all that out, here's what I actually make in a year. If you're self-employed, it's your net income that we're looking at. Okay, so if you work for someone else, your gross income, self-employed, it's your net income that we're assessing to see if it's under these income limits here that we just talked about. It can include benefits that you receive, if it's unemployment or Social Security or even child support or alimony, that all counts. It can include periodic payments from friends and family. When you fill out the lottery application, which I'm just going to bring up here again, we try to give you a pretty comprehensive list of typical and maybe not so typical sources of income. It's really to your benefit to go through this carefully and make sure that you're not missing any sources of income. I get that employer is the one that comes to mind most readily when someone says, what do I make? We think, well, what do I make at my job? Of course. But there are other sources of income that the program requires that we count. So maybe you get child support and alimony, like we talked about. Maybe you get Social Security. Maybe you get Social Security disability. Maybe you're getting periodic payments from pension, or you're retired and you get periodic distributions from your retirement account. Maybe you're getting workman's compensation or unemployment compensation. Maybe you're getting this periodic payments from friends and family that I talked about. Maybe you have interest income on assets that you own. Maybe there's something we haven't talked about. So you want to go through that. That's for your benefit and for ours. It's important that we know what your income is, but it's also important for you to get it in there accurately because during the lottery, we're not going to make you submit, or let me say that again, to get into the lottery, we're not going to make you submit supporting documentation to prove all this stuff. So we're not going to ask you for pay stubs. We're not going to ask you for taxes. We're not going to ask you for, statements from the court about how much child support or alimony you get, or any of these things here. We're just going to take at face value whatever you put in this chart. Okay, so if you put in the numbers here and it says, you make $60,000, we're going to say, okay, you make $60,000, you're eligible for the lottery, assuming the other requirements are met. But after the lottery, if you're one of the top households and you're invited to move forward, we have to actually do that deep dive, and we have to collect all this, the information, the documents where you prove what your income and assets are. And so even if someone mistakenly or purposefully doesn't accurately state what their income is here, it usually shows up, okay? And we usually find it because it shows up in other places. It shows up in your bank accounts and other places. And we'll ask about it, right? So if you just say like, oh, I make $60,000 from my job, and and then later on we're looking at your pay stubs, but then we see like, $500 every 2 weeks going in that's not from your job. Well, we're going to ask about that. And if it's from some other undisclosed source, we're going to find out, and that might bump you up over the income limit. So, I don't think many people do that purposefully. Some people do, not many, but some people mistakenly just don't, overlook certain income sources. So take your time, go through it. You don't want to get disappointed later on because you mistakenly forgot that some source of income that you have you didn't realize was income. That stinks if if you go through this process and you're excited and you get the top spot in the lottery and you've gone to see the unit and you met the developer and you want to buy the unit, and then you go through this process and you're like, oh shoot, I didn't realize that counts as income and now I'm over. That stinks. So take your time, make sure you don't miss anything. Same thing with the assets. You got this $275,000 asset limit. That includes, any down payment assistance you get from friend or family, not like from a bank or your lender. If they have down payment assistance program, that wouldn't count. But if it's, mom and dad or something like that, or a close family friend who says, here's $10,000 to help you out, great. That counts as an asset, though. We're looking at your checking and savings account. Savings account is whatever is currently in your savings account. Checking, we have to do an average of the last 6 months. Certificates of deposit, net value of stocks and retirement accounts. Recognize that if you're not retired, you may not be able to access what's in the account without taking a penalty. But unless you would have to retire or quit your job to access that money, you do technically have access to it. You just pay a penalty, and it would be that post-penalty amount that we count. So you'd have to get a letter from the administrator of the retirement account that says, Dave Cashman has $70,000 in his retirement account. If he accesses it today, he's going to pay a penalty of $10,000, and so it has a net cash value of $60,000. And that's the amount that we would count. You could have bonds, you could have cash apps. That's pretty common. Venmo, PayPal. It's really no different than a bank account in many ways. It counts as an asset, and we would count that. We need to get statements for those. And don't forget, assets can generate income, and that gets counted up here against the income limit. Again, let me just show you the page here. We've tried to list some pretty common and maybe not so common sources of assets. So same as with the income table, when you fill it out, take your time, really go through it, make sure that you're not missing certain assets that you may own, because it could come back later potentially to put you over the asset limit, and that would be a shame if you just mistakenly overlooked it. Okay, so let's move on. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how this works. So you submit your lottery application. You should get a response from us within 1 to 3 business days. If you're ineligible, we'll let you know. If you're incomplete, we'll send you a letter saying what's missing. And if you're eligible, you'll get your lottery application number, which will be in the form of A. blank blank blank, as you see here. If you're the very first person to submit a complete lottery application, you will be A.001. That doesn't mean you're number one. It has no meaning at all, except that you were the first person to submit an application. It's just a way to keep your name out of the lottery when we do the lottery and to keep your information private. So don't draw any inferences from the lottery number. It's just an anonymous identifier. That lottery application number will also have some other information repeating or detailing what you put in your lottery application. Make sure you read through that and make sure it's all accurate. We do sortings. When we do the lottery, we have to sort it and rank people based not only on where they're pulled in the lottery, but based on other priority categories. And some of those will be in the lottery notice that we send to you. So it's important that that information is correct, because it could impact where you land on the waiting list. So just read that notice, make sure it all lines up with what you think you put in your lottery application. If anything looks wrong, let us know. Like you might say, hey, you said I was a type 1 household, but in fact, I'm a type 2 household. And that's an important thing for us to know, and we want to correct that before the lottery. So take your time looking through that. You'll also get a documents requirements prep guide, and that details all of the income, asset, and tax documents that will be required from you if you're invited to move forward after the lottery. A few minutes ago, we talked about how we put you into the lottery, based on what you put as your income and assets here, and we take it at face value. But after the lottery, if you're invited to move forward, you have to actually prove up what your income and assets are with statements from your bank, from your employer, your taxes, etc. And so if you're eligible for the lottery, in the notice we send you, we'll also send you this guide going into painstaking detail about exactly what's going to be required to prove up your income and assets. If you're serious about this opportunity, it's a great time to start collecting those things, because there's a lot that's required, and the earlier you get started, the easier it'll be. So you're not scrambling after the lottery to try and get everything together in a week, which I think is how much time you'll have. So get started early, build a folder, start putting things in there. That'll make your life a lot easier after the lottery if you're invited to move forward. The lottery date is July 29th, 6 p.m. It'll be run just like we're doing now, probably by my colleague Catherine. It'll be just a Zoom call. We'll put all the lottery household numbers, the A dot blank blank blank, into a box, pick them out one by one, and show them as we go. You don't have to attend the lottery. Everyone will be notified of the results at the same time. You certainly can if you want to. You're more than welcome, but if you're busy that night, don't feel like, oh, I have to be there. That has some impact on, where I'll be. It doesn't. If you're busy or you just don't want to go, you don't have to. You'll still get notified of the results. Please keep in mind, household type. It's one of the questions on the lottery application. What it basically refers to is how many people are in your household. And that's important because the program wants priority for the units to go to larger households who need all 2 bedrooms. For example, 4-person household is a type 2 household. The program wants them to have priority for a 2-bedroom unit versus, say, a 1-person household who arguably doesn't need 2 bedrooms. They might just like 2 bedrooms. So when we do the lottery drawing, even if this 1-person household who's a type 1 is the very first person picked in the lottery, they're still going to be behind the type 2 households. So 4-person households, 3-person households, and some of these 2-person combinations in here. So again, it's just the program really wants to make sure, a type 1 household could end up purchasing the unit. They're not precluded from purchasing it. There's no rule against it. Just when we do the lottery, when we create the order afterwards, the program requires that we give higher priority to these larger household types who ostensibly need 2 bedrooms rather than just sort of wanting 2 bedrooms. Keep in mind, too, nobody wins anything at the lottery. There's no winners and losers. Everyone who's eligible for the lottery, who gets one of these notices that says, hey, you're eligible for the lottery and here's your application number, every person will be in the lottery. Every person will be picked. Every person will be put on the waiting list, which details the order of priority for moving forward. So if you're the first person on the waiting list after the lottery, all that means is that you're going to have the first opportunity to, or you're going to be among the households invited to submit all your income and asset and tax docs. And if you're still eligible, you're going to have the opportunity to meet with the sales team and potentially purchase the unit. If you're the 4th person on the waiting list after the lottery, that just means that you have to see what happens with 3 households ahead of you to see if you're actually going to get a chance. You may and you may not. If the 3 households ahead of you don't end up buying the unit for one reason or another, you might get that chance. If they do buy it, unfortunately, you won't get that chance. But again, everyone in the lottery will have a position on the waiting list. which determines sort of if and when they might get the chance to move forward. As I mentioned a bit ago, the top households after the lottery will be invited to submit the income and asset documentation that's required. You'll be given a week to do so. And there's a lot that is required, and particularly if you have like complex, if you're self-employed in various places and you're going to have to do multiple profit and loss statements, if you've got lots of unexplained deposits coming into your bank accounts, that stuff can take a while to pull together. So particularly if you fall into that bucket, the earlier you can get started on this, the better. If you just collect, a bi-monthly, pay from your employer, it might be a little quicker and easier. And then there's everything in between. You know your own situation better than we do. But for certain people, certainly 7 days can be pretty quick. There can be a lot to pull together. So getting started earlier doesn't hurt. So we'll review the documentation that you submit. If you're not eligible, we'll let you know. You'll have the opportunity to appeal that. If you are eligible, then there's this additional step. I know, lots of steps. We have to send your file to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, commonly known as EOHLC. They're the program administrator. They get the final say on whether you're eligible. I would say in the vast majority of cases, they agree with us in the files that we submit and say are eligible. They say, yep, we agree. But just keep in mind, we are not the final say. It is conceivable that we would miss something and they would come back and say, hey, we think you missed this. And in fact, this person's over the income limit. We would certainly hope that doesn't happen, but it could. Unlikely, but it could. If you are approved by them, to be put in touch with the owner or their sales team to schedule a tour of the home. At that time, you'd be invited to reserve the unit. You put down a $500 refundable deposit with your reservation. Then typically within 10 days, you're expected to sign the purchase and sale agreement, at which time you put down a deposit of 1.5% of the sales price minus the $500 that you put down here. At this time, we always recommend that you get an attorney. Purchase and sale agreement is a legal contract spelling out rights and obligations. Usually a home purchase is the biggest or one of the biggest purchases that we make in our lives. So having an attorney to represent you can be very helpful in making sure that your interests are best represented and nothing is going to surprise you later. If you sign the purchase and sale agreement, then you'll have a date to get your mortgage commitment. When you do get that mortgage commitment, you'll have to come back to SEB for one final review to demonstrate that you're still eligible, okay? You have to be eligible for the unit all the way up through the closing. So if we invite you forward after the lottery, you give us all your pay stubs, bank statements, taxes, etc. We say, great, we've looked through everything, you're eligible. Couple months rolls by, you're moving through the sales process, but during that time you took a new job, your pay went up, now you're over the income limit, now you might not be eligible. So you have to stay eligible all the way up through closing, which basically means up through the second review that we do at the time you get your mortgage commitment. So please don't forget that. If you stay eligible at that final review, then you can move forward with the closing on the home. I should state that whatever happens after you close on the home, there isn't another review, there isn't another screening, you don't have to submit yearly or any type of periodic statement to us about what your income or assets are. So if you close on the home and 6 months later, fortunes turn your way and you get a new job and significantly increase your income, great. No problem, you've already owned the home and that's not going to disqualify you or anything else. You don't even have to tell anyone about it. Any questions? I just want to say one thing too. If you go on our website, you will see we do provide the sample deed rider. Admittedly, it's a bit of a tough legal document, but it looks like Amanda's trying to draw on my screen. I'm not sure how you're doing that, Amanda, but could you please stop? Okay, I'm going to stop my share then. But the deed rider, it is a bit of a tough legal document, but it's spelled. If you could spend a little time with it, there's a summary of it in the information packet that might actually be a better exercise to read that. And then if you want to dig in a little deeper, you can look at the sample deed rider on our website. But that really spells out in detail some of your obligations as a homeowner, about using it as your principal residence. It's not something to be rented out, Airbnb, to make money on. It details how the monitoring agent will go about setting the resale price if you're to sell the unit in the future. May come as no surprise that there's a formula for that. So like, this isn't an opportunity to buy it for $190,000 and flip it in a year from now for $500,000. You can expect to see some appreciation on your investment, but it's going to be formulaic, and it's going to be pretty moderate year over year. It's not going to be some huge windfall that necessarily tracks the market in general, or what a market rate unit might do. I think there was a question about local. So Gwyneth, do you have a local resident priority? We do not. And the reason we do not is because you're not allowed to implement a local preference for more than 70% of the units. There's only one unit. So that would be 100% necessarily. I think we may have done one in the original lottery. I quite honestly can't remember. But at any point, at any rate, this is with just one unit. There's no local preference. Next question is it ADA modified in any way? I have no knowledge of that. I've never been told about any ADA modifications. I don't believe so. If you're to move forward and see the unit, you could certainly take a look and see, but it's pretty uncommon, and I have not been given any information about ADA modifications. What other questions do we have? Anyone? No? All right. Well, thank you for coming out. I hope you found this informative and helpful. We'll look forward to receiving your applications. This is by no means your last chance to ask questions. If you have questions in the future, you can certainly reach out to us. Sometimes, I know, particularly as you start to complete the application, you may come up with a question that you're not thinking of right now. A lot of times we come up with our questions as we begin to sort of engage in the process. So, at any point, certainly feel free to use us as a resource, and be happy to answer your question. But with that, I'll wrap it up, and thanks a lot for attending, and we look forward to getting your application. Good night, everyone.
You.
Yeah, you got it. Good night.
Good night.